anyways, so your strategy for learning things,
So, it's about staying intellectually curious. So to me, the day you stop becoming intellectually curious is the day you die. Right? So the only way you essentially are alive is you're constantly learning. So it's never about, taking the horse to the water and making it drink. It's about making them thirsty. So the way I look at the life is that every single person, if you can inspire them to be intellectually curious, you have created a society that will always be learning and moving forward, right? The other part that I really like is that there has never been a time in the human history where individuals and small group of people are able to make an impact that could only be done in the initially kings and the queen and the aristocrats, and then later came by these nation states and superpowers. The same thing that were done by the nation states and superpower are now being done by individuals and a small group of people. Whether it's going to space, it's no longer done by the nation states. Is being done by private companies, whether it's Elon or Richard or Jeff. They're all going out and doing things that would never be done. NASA did not invent reusable rocket. It is the private companies that innovate because they constantly have the reason to be cheaper, better, faster. Same thing is starting to see in other areas of the industries, healthcare. Healthcare is not going to be solved by Obamacare or Trump care or Putin care. It's going to be solved by some entrepreneur saying enough is enough. And we're sick and tired of the system that's constantly victimizing the humanity. When pharmaceutical companies have become parasite on humanity, the humanity must come together to kill the parasite. And that's exactly what is going to happen. Our education system will have to be completely rethought and reimagined, that was designed for teaching you skills, and now we're living in the world of exponential technologies where any skill that you learn becomes obsolete by the time you actually graduate. And you have to completely rethink about learning to learn, learning to be able to solve problems, learning to be multidisciplinary rather than unidisciplinary, because problems tend to be multidisciplinary, not unidisciplinary. Right? And coming back to how I learn is that I tend to go deep into the subject when I'm starting a company. So in this particular case, when I started on the company on about human health, and we really wanted to understand why is it that people get sick? Why is it that people die? Why is it that people age? And idea really comes down to is that it can't be your DNA, because your DNA never changes. Your DNA is always the same from the time you're born to the time you die.
DNA is a computer program essentially made up of alphabet letters.
That's exactly. So your DNA is really the alphabet that can write any story you want it to write. And your RNA is really the story that's being written. So it's not the genes.
The story that you can write or that anyone else can write based on the idea that our own electrochemical signals that we produce based on more quantum physics principles can actually affect the other way people think and feel and believe.
Absolutely true. So there's a whole lot more to the things. What I was trying to say was that your genes are not your destiny. Mm-hmm. It is the gene expression is what your destiny is. And when you start to think about your gene expression, there is something that I never knew, which is if you look at just the number of cells in the human body, we have more microbial cells in our human body than the human cells. Right? That means the cells you get from your mom and dad are less than what we essentially acquire after we are born and through this microbial ecosystem. But that's really nothing. What's really interesting is that human DNA only produces about 22,000 genes. When it comes to the microbes primarily living in our gut, they produce 2 million to 20 million genes. That means at best we are 1% human. That means all the genes that are expressed in our body, less than 1% come from human DNA. And that's really interesting, that if our gene expression is what makes us who we are, and we have completely ignored the largest organ in our body. And that was a big breakthrough for me.
Well, not only have we completely ignored it, but I mean, I'd argue we've, to a certain extent, damaged it, right? I mean, back to that old friends hypothesis I mentioned earlier, the whole idea behind that is that we have wiped out friendly species via our era of post-industrialized antibiotic use and antibacterials that have rendered us microbially deplete to a certain extent.
And it is Right, yes, absolutely correct. But I want to also hit on the point in a little bit more nuanced way. It's not necessary that our microbes need to be what they used to be in the past, or they need to be in something, if you look at the aborigines or the people who are living on the Amazonian forest, they have a very different microbes and they have very different set of DNA mutations. And we can essentially get a little bit more into science if you want. Now, for example, in the modern human DNA, we believe if you have a larger copies of a DNA called APOE4, people believe that is associated with chances of getting a higher disease, Alzheimer's disease.
Alzheimer's, yeah, to a certain extent, Alzheimer's and cardiovascular.
And
You know, I'm a carrot, the APOE 3-4, right? So that
I'm 4
yeah,
foods,
you
right?
make decisions in life, right? You don't need as much saturated fat.
However, what they found is very interesting. The people who are living in the Amazonian forest have 6-8 copies of APOE4 and they never get Alzheimer's. An interesting thing is that gene also tend to be extremely protective gene against infection. Since they have lot of these insects and stuff, parasite that cause infection, APOE4 actually protects them from these bacterial infections.
Similar to like the sickle cell anemia gene.
Exactly.
One against
Malaria.
from mosquitoes. Yeah.
So sickle cell was designed to essentially protect you from malaria. And now people essentially get today, obviously, gluten sensitivity and to some extent a lot of the other chronic diseases.